Hey folks, if you're looking to get better as a GM, one of the easy things you can do is to ask your players for feedback. So today I'm going to talk to you about a couple of different ways you can ask for feedback, as well as some tips on how to ask those questions to get kind of really good answers and good responses to help you improve. Okay, as far as when and how you ask for feedback, I kind of see it as there are two main ways that you can ask for feedback. The first is asking in person right after session. So everybody's wrapping things up. You say, how was tonight's session? And get the feedback. So the pros with this is because you're in person, you're going to be getting those nonverbal communication and, maybe things aren't going to be misconstrued versus if you were just like texting and asking for feedback. You also will get immediate feedback. So people will still be in the moment, and if it was a great session, you're probably going to get that really great and energetic, oh my gosh, this was so amazing. If it was a tough session, you're definitely going to know that. And this kind of, I think, can be a con because sometimes you might not get as thoughtful of feedback. People might be really in that moment, which is great, but then if there were things that they didn't love about the session, they're probably not going to think of those things, and those are probably the things you want to know so that you can improve, to get better, to be a better game master, to be just as well as a better player. A lot of these tips will also apply to players asking for feedback. So kind of the other method for asking for feedback is to wait a day or two and ask via text, whether that's posting in the Facebook group that you've created for your session or sending individual texts to people. Now, I think this is nice because it allows people to go home and sit with something, and if something didn't work for them, they'll probably have figured it out by then and be able to pinpoint it much more, and they'll be able to give better feedback to you about why it didn't work or what they think would have made it a better session. Now, you will lose some of that in the moment feedback, and also it might be a little hard sometimes to get people to give you that feedback when it's not quite in person. I do suppose you could also talk to them a couple days after session, or you could ask for immediate feedback via having them text you or just jot some things down on a note card and hand it in. Now, one way that you're going to get better feedback is to make sure that you essentially have an open door policy from the beginning, that you want to get feedback from the players. You are open to it, whether it's, hey, this is great, this was amazing, or, this session didn't work for me and this is why. And establishing that very much like you are looking for feedback, but also you want constructive criticism, not just what didn't you like, but why didn't you like it. That brings me to some of my tips on kind of how to ask questions so that you're getting better feedback. First of all, have an idea of what are the things that you want to improve on. And then you can ask for feedback on those specific things. Like I've recently been trying to get a little bit better at describing locations and people in my games. So I might at the end of the session be like, hey, what did you think about this description of this location? What did you think about the description of the NPC when I first introduced them? So next, I think it's good to ask your players what worked for them, and also ask them what's not working, and ask for specifics, or ask them why it's working, why it's not working. I think it's very important to not only focus on, well, what's not working and how can I improve that, but also to ask what is working for the players. What are the things that you're doing that they really like so that you can make sure you keep doing those things. So here are a couple of sample questions you may ask your players. What was your favorite part of tonight's session? I like this one because it's not just saying, hey, did you enjoy this session? What did you think? You're asking a little bit more specific, because oftentimes if you just say, hey, what did you think? People will be like, oh, it was fun, it was great. But you're not going to get those specific feedback to kind of focus on like, oh, this is what I did really well this session. So asking for a favorite moment, then you get to find out like, oh, they really love this NPC. Maybe I'll have that NPC show up again. Or this combat went really well tonight. Great, I can keep that in mind moving forward and structure my combat in a similar way. Kind of similar question, what elements of tonight's session do you want to see in the future? So this is asking, getting some good feedback, especially if you're running like a homebrew where you've got a little bit more flexibility on what's going to be coming up in future sessions. Then you can plan to include those things that worked really well moving forward. If you notice that somebody didn't seem to be having as good of a time, ask them, what about tonight's session did you not like and why? And I will say that so with this, I think keep the feedback, take all of the feedback with a grain of salt, because somebody may not have enjoyed a particular part of a session, but you're not going to please everybody all the time. And also you might run into okay, well, that's just a difference in play styles. And so you may not necessarily need to change your GMing style, but maybe this isn't the best fit for that player, or, okay, well, I'm going to keep doing this. I'll try and make sure that I balance it out so there aren't a ton of shopping episodes, or we don't have too many puzzles, but we have a few other people in the group that enjoy these things. So it is a bit of a balancing act with this feedback. Also just ask, what are my strengths and weaknesses as a GM? This is something that maybe you don't want to ask at the end of every session, but when you come to the end of kind of a chapter, that might be a good time to check in and say hey, I've been running 4 sessions now. What are the things you notice that you think I could improve on? And what are the things that I'm really good at? It's nice to find out that you're doing a good job. And then that can also help guide you if you're trying to figure out, well, I know I want to improve, but I'm not really sure what I need to be doing. Ask your players. They might be able to see something that you aren't aware of. So also, this is a great opportunity to give feedback to your players, to reward great roleplay moments and say, hey, I really loved it with the way that your character connected and interacted with this NPC, or that was such a cool use of that spell in the fight. I did not see it coming. Just kind of setting up that conversation, and that feedback is part of kind of the structure of the night. That it's okay, you sit down, you play the session, and then you get a little bit of feedback to improve moving forward. One thing I learned in, I think it was high school or college, and I've always tried to keep it in mind when I'm giving criticism, when I'm giving feedback to people, is to sandwich the criticism. So that is that you sandwich a negative, constructive, negative criticism between 2 positives. So for example, as a player, I might tell my GM, hey, I really loved the way you described the woods we were in, not just the visuals, but also the smells. It really made it feel immersive. I didn't love combat this session. It really felt like we just got to a point where we were just standing and bashing, and I really couldn't find a better way to do things, and so it just slogged on. The NPC we ran into in the woods was great. I kind of hope that we run into him again. So there you've got the positive, the negative constructive, and the positive. You're acknowledging the things that are being done well, and also bringing up things that can get improved on. Now, that example, I didn't really have a solution necessarily, and your players may not have a solution for the feedback and criticism that they're giving, but you can also ask them what they would do in that situation, especially if you have a player that also has been a GM. That's one thing that I've sometimes done where I've been something didn't work this session. What would you have done? And then I can take their feedback and incorporate it into how I move forward. So there you go. Those are some methods for asking for feedback and kind of tips on how to get constructive, good feedback that will give you the specifics so that you can improve as a GM. So how do you ask for feedback? Are there any specific questions that you like to use or methods? Let's talk about it more down in the comments below. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and share it with somebody that you think would enjoy this video as well. Don't forget to subscribe. We make videos here every Tuesday and Thursday. A big thanks to our patrons, especially Bryce. If you want to support our channel, you can head over to our Patreon page and check out the perks of being a patron. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye! One thing that I